Today is part one of the template guitar building series that I'm doing. What we're going to do is take these and turn them into this using things like this. Here's a close-up of this neck that we're going to build using those parts and those templates. All right, the question is, why am I doing a whole video series on building a guitar with templates? Over the past several years, I can't count how many people have asked me, do I sell my templates? And up until recently, the answer has always been no. The reason it was no is I just felt like I'd rather be building guitars than building templates or making templates. And I had a gentleman named Randy from Canada who changed my mind on that. He's looking to build his first guitar, and he inquired about the templates, and I first said no, and he explained what he was doing, and it was his first guitar build, and he liked a lot of the features that I had in the templates. And frankly, I made these templates for my students in my class. And if you saw my recent template series, I've totally reinvented these templates to make them a whole lot more precise and 10 times safer than maybe they were before. So Randy convinced me to make a set of templates for him, and so I did, and that was my first template sale that I've ever done. So it just got me thinking that it's really not that big of a deal now that I've invested all of the time in making the designs, the CADs, tweaking them, testing them to ensure accuracy and such. It really is not that hard to make additional templates. So I thought for the first time I would make those available for sale. In the information with this video down below, I'm going to put some basic information, how to contact me, basic pricing of the templates. Now here's the thing right now. I make Tele templates and Strat templates for my students at my class because that's what I teach in the basic guitar building class, is they have to build a variation of one of those two guitars. So right now I have the Tele set available and the Strat set I'm expecting to go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that everything is spot on, and I add little details inscribed into the acrylic and things like that so that there's kind of basic instructions on the templates themselves. I'm not going to be printing a whole bunch of them out and storing them, so anyone that is interested in templates, it'll be a set made to order. So it won't be one of these things where you have them in 2 days, but with the Tele set being pretty much perfected at this point, I can get a set of those out pretty quickly with a lot of different options. Why don't you look at this picture? It's just a screen grab from my CAD program, and that'll show you right now all the different variations of pickup combinations that I make optional templates that work with the same alignment pin system that I have throughout this series. So any of those templates that you see can be ordered for whatever set that you need for the guitar you want to build. So when we talk about this series, this is going to be a multi-part series. I don't know if it's going to be 3 or 4 episodes. It just depends on how long it takes me to get through all the different facets of working with these templates. I'm not going to go through and re-explain every single thing I do in making a fretboard or neck or so on and so forth. I'm only going to really take time to describe the things about the templates that you want to ensure to get the best possible use out of those templates. Now you can certainly make your own templates. I've given away all of the knowledge of what I do and how I do these and setting them up, and you can make your own, and that's perfectly fine, and maybe this series will be a benefit to you. If you're using other templates that don't have all the features or the same features that I build into my templates, then maybe some of this will apply and maybe other stuff will not apply. But in the end, this series is really for my students who will be using my templates in class and the people who purchase these templates, so that I can give you a very specific, detailed approach on how to best use these templates. And I'm not saying that they can't be used in other ways and in different orders of operations than what I do. And that's certainly for the individual to decide, but I will show what I have had great success in using these templates. So I made one of the necks just to show you what the final product is going to be. Now this is the new square contour. You might have seen that is an up-and-coming rage. All right, I haven't done the contour on this yet, and my transition areas and things that I normally do, because I didn't feel like they were important for the template process. All of that is done basically by hand or jig in my case. So I'm going to take you through what it takes to take this piece of Paduke and this piece of Palfero, which is also called Bolivian rosewood, which is also called Morado, my favorite name, which is also called some technical species that I can't pronounce. So I don't know if this is the winner, but this has 4 names. And all I know is that it's a pretty cool wood, nice and dense. It's got that kind of rosewood vibe to it, but there's a reddish orange tint to the Morado that's really going to go well with the Paduke. Now, don't get too excited about the Paduke. It will age and brown over time, so it will not be this bright orange. But I tell you, when you take this to the router table and you create all these shavings of orange, it's kind of cool. But it will brown over time, and it's just going to be a great match with this fretboard. So I figured, heck, if I'm going to do this demonstration, I might as well build a neck that I can use in a guitar, and I might as well build another neck just like it for the second guitar that I build maybe of a series. The first thing we're going to do, though, is actually slot the frets in this. Now, I will tell you there are 2 different fret slotting jigs that I have made over the years. The first one is pretty generic, and they're made to each scale, and they have a notch, and the idea is you would use a table saw. You can use a standard table saw if you can find a blade that's the right kerf that reaches tall enough for whatever your table saw design is, in order to at least expose 3 millimeters of that blade. If you can get 3 millimeters of that blade outside of your table saw and a crosscut sled, then you'll be fine. But this is pretty much a standard way to go about doing it. The other style that I introduced, I don't know, a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, is a fret slotting template that already has guide alignment pins, the bushings, the drill bushing alignment for the alignment pins already in there. Now, I can't really make you one of these unless you can tell me precisely to the fraction of the millimeter the distance from the right side of the indexing pin in your crosscut sled to the right side of the saw blade, okay? Because this is made specifically for my setup using my distance, so that I offset that distance for my alignment pins exactly the right amount, so that when I put a piece of wood on here and I drill those alignment pin holes and then I cut those slots, everything is referencing these alignment pins. Okay, so, and I've shown this on other videos, but it wouldn't matter if I attached this, you know, crooked. It's still going to be straight as long as my fretboard fits onto the wood. It's still going to be straight because of the alignment pins. Okay, but I can't make these for people if I don't know a precise measurement. So therefore, for most people, what you're going to have to do is use a system like this one here. and this one can be used with any of those saw type systems because it's just a precision indexing reference so that you can get a 25.5-inch scale to put the slots into the fretboard itself. Now, the important thing when you're using a template to do your fret slots in a conventional way is that you have at least one edge of this wood that has been totally squared up, and that is going to become a reference edge. Now, in this particular case, I've got it basically squared and I've got it parallel because I wanted to have options. Okay, the options of which side is going to be the bass side and which side is going to be the treble side, and which side is going to be up and which side is going to be down. Now, just for the fun of it, I'm going to try to match this one as close as possible. So you see we've got a little bit looser grain on the bass side, the lower bass side area. So I'm going to try to mimic that. This side is going to have to be down so that I'm cutting the frets in this side here. And in order for that to get to the side I want, it's going to have to be away from me because when flipped over, it'll be the closest side to me, and that will be fine. So when we put a template, a fretboard on a traditional template, the only reference that we have with our sliding crosscut table is this side of the template. So therefore, this edge of the wood has got to be perfectly flush with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some double stick tape on the board and I'm going to assemble these together, and I'm probably going to stand them up vertical as I press them together to make sure. Now, you have to understand another principle when it comes to fretboard templates is where you see the nut or fret 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth, where you see those positions isn't where it's cutting. The indexing pin on most crosscut sliding tables is going to be offset a certain amount. That amount doesn't matter. It could be a ½ inch, it could be 2 inches. Okay, it's going to offset the same on every single cut, therefore every single cut is going to be good. The only thing that you have to be aware of is whatever your offset is, you have to allocate that space so that you don't go off on the last fret and it goes off the edge of the fretboard because you lined everything up according to be in line with the fret markers, but they're going to offset the cuts. So I have to make sure I can fit at least 21 frets plus that offset onto this neck here. So I'm going to position it so the nut is all the way at the end because I know that this is offset I think a ½ inch on my saw. It could be a ¼ inch, but I know that's going to give me enough room. And here's the critical part. They have got to be at the same reference. Okay, so I've just assured that it's perfectly flush on this side, which is my reference. Now I'm going to go set up the saw and get ready to make these cuts. All right, before you cut your slots, one of the first things you got to do is figure out how deep that slot is going to go. And you can watch one of my previous videos where I talked about how to calculate that. You want that slot to be deep enough once the fretboard is radiused that the most shallow part of that fret slot is deep enough for the tang of the frets that you're using. In this particular case, this fret that I'll be using is 1.6 millimeters deep on the tang. Now, you can go back and you can kind of see how I did it by modeling it in CAD and figuring out exactly on the outer edges of the widest part of that radius how deep that needed to be. I typically just go ahead and use somewhere around 3. Now, if you're going to bind a fretboard, it doesn't really matter. You can go a little bit deeper if you want, but generally speaking, you don't need any more than 3 to 3.2 millimeters in order to make sure it seats nicely even at the widest part of whatever radius you're going to use. The other thing that I will let you know is I'm using my newer jig design right here for this demonstration, but I am using it the old-fashioned way. I'm not using my alignment pins in this particular case because I want to show you how to do it with the basic one. The only reason I'm using this one here, I'm now making the notch in the nut area wide enough where if you make a cut to the left of the reference pin and to the right of the reference pin, you should be able to get a standard 1/8 inch nut there. Now you'll have to adjust that because each saw is a little different. You may either have to file that slightly wider after you do a test cut, or you might have to put a piece of tape in there, a little piece of binding tape to take up some slack in order to get that size just right. So it's going to take a test fit since your saw is going to be different than my saw. So as an example of what I'm talking about, I've just put 3 pieces of binding tape right on the left edge of the nut notch. I use the left because it's the right which will be the indexing. Okay, so every slot that I do will be based upon my indexing pin on the right side of this slot, so meaning I'm pushing my template and fretboard to the left. Since that is now referenced to the first fret and so on and so forth, the extra space for the nut on the headstock side comes from the left side of this notch. So I put a few pieces of tape on there so I make it a little bit more narrow, and then I can measure it, and if it's less than 1/8 of an inch, I take the tape out and I'll make another pass and it'll be fine. And I'm going to go do all the fret slots now. However, I'm going to cut the nut slot channel after the fact because I want that to be a little bit deeper so that that nut sits in there, knowing that I've got about 3 millimeters of wood. I don't want to take it too deep, but I may go about 4.5 millimeters, and that should be a lot better. I wanted to stop and give you a tip on how to prevent a mistake. So on this fret slot, I have 22 total notches, 22 slots that can be cut out. And that's fine if you're doing a Strat, but if you're doing a Tele and there's 21 frets, you might be on a roll and just keep going and do the 22nd one and just totally forget. Don't ask me how I know that. So what I've gotten a habit of doing is just taking a piece of tape and put it over the 22nd, and that's kind of like a flag, like, oh, don't do that one. Okay, so that's what I do to help prevent that. Let's finish this up. All right, don't forget to look at your slots when you get done, because another thing that is common, that there's so many notches there that you can get confused and you miss one. And if you miss one, get it now. Don't take the template off because you'll never get it lined back up to the exact same spot. Now we're going to do the nut slot, and like I said, I want that to be about 4.5 millimeters. If you don't already have a fret slot cutting saw blade or setup, I happen to be using the Burns saw that is extremely accurate right out of the box. I did a video on it. You can look back and find the Burns saw video. It's actually one of my most popular videos because it has people, not only guitar makers, but model makers and other people who require very detailed, precise work looking at the video and hence probably buying them because they're pretty awesome saws. If you're going to take just a generic saw and find a jeweler's saw blade where you can get the right width, I prefer 25 thousandths. That's what I find works great. And the ones that sometimes you see for sale are about 23 thousandths or 24 thousandths. I think they're too tight. So if you can find a 25 thousandths jeweler's saw, I think you'll be pretty happy with that. On the nut notch, remember, and I'm saying things again just to repeat them so that you get this, but I'm basically defining the boundaries of that nut slot by going to the locator, the reference pin, to the full right and to the full left, and then I can clean out the center. Okay, after defining the boundaries, I've gone back and I have cut out the center sections just by doing multiple passes, kind of creeping it over. not being too creepy, but just creeping the blade over. And now I can test fit with an 1/8 inch nut, and it is slightly too small. So that is when I then take off some of this tape. And I'm in no hurry, so I'm going to take off one. I think I actually have 3 here total. I'm going to take off one, do another test cut, and check it out again, and stop when it fits. Okay, and as you can see there, it's focusing on my face. There we go. That's a perfect fit. Okay, when you're done with the fret slotting template, now you have to get the fretboard template perfectly aligned. Now this is a tricky part. And speaking of tricky parts, be very careful as you're prying this off. You don't want to break the template, which is less likely, or the fretboard that is at a weakened state because of all the slots that you put into it. Okay, now we want to get this template. Now, when we're looking at it from the top, we can easily get the scribed lines in the template to line up with the fret slots. The problem is, how do we do it on the other side? All right, so one of the things we want to do is we want to scribe a center line into the board. Now, I've already done that, and for an example, if you can see that, I scribed a center line that's not in the center of this 2.75 inch wide fretboard. It's slightly offset because I wanted to maximize the straight grain, so I shifted the whole thing over to the other side, which is perfectly fine to do. The thing that we have to do is get that center line transferred to the back, and then we need at least 2 of the fret slots transferred to the back so that we can use that as alignment points for this template. When you're using the self-centering, if you go through the trouble of getting the measurements so that I can make that for you, the self-aligning pins in here, you won't have to do any of that because the alignment pins are already established beforehand, which is really the beauty of that system. So the best thing is going to be a square and a pencil, and be as accurate as you possibly can. And if you'll remember, I'm working off of the same reference side as what was the reference side over there. Okay, now that I've got the measurement, the same as what I set on the other side, I'm just going to drag a line with my little square all the way down. Again, working off of the same reference side. Now the other thing you will see on these templates is you will see a scribed center line going all the way down the middle. Okay, you want to use that as your reference. Now the scribing is on the top if you can read the letters, but this is symmetrical, so it really doesn't matter which side is up and down. And what you'll find is if you actually put this template upside down, the scribed line in the acrylic will be closest to the pencil line that you put on your fretboard. So it'll be a lot easier to see exactly when it's lined up perfectly. This time I don't have to go anywhere near crazy on the tape, and that's only because we're getting this on here for alignment purposes only so that we can use the drilling inserts. Okay, and this is one of the beautiful things about this template system. Those hardened steel drilling bushings basically allow you to create perfect drilled holes for alignment point both on the underside of the fretboard and the top of the neck. And that allows them to marry up perfectly as we get further down this road of construction. And the fact that they're hardened steel drilling bushings planted into this acrylic is they won't wear out. So if you're making one guitar, it's going to be fine. If you're making 100 guitars, it's still going to be fine. If you're making 10,000 guitars, you might want to get a CNC. Okay, I've got the first fret scribe line lined up with my actual first fret and the 21st fret, and I got it on the center line, held together with 2 temporary pieces of tape. Now we're going to go to the drill press and we're going to drill the holes for our 4 alignment pins. And for the alignment pins, be careful with the depth. Common tendency is to forget about how thick this piece of wood is and just kind of plunge down. Or if you use a hand drill, it gets kind of touch and go whether you're holding that perfectly straight or not. Even a drilling bushing that's only a 1/4 inch tall is not going to provide perfect alignment. You're better off using a drill press or something stable enough to keep that drill hole perpendicular. So I'm going to go and bottom out this drill bit and set my 0 position on this particular drill press. It has that. And I'm going to go about half the thickness of the wood, so right around 3 millimeters, give or take a little bit, is what I'm going to do. So right around 1/8 of an inch. Okay, that's a good amount. Now we've got the alignment holes in all 4 locations. And you can see that this template is not even close to being centered in the middle of this piece of wood. It doesn't matter. It just has to fit on there. And I did it in a way that gave me the most straight grain as possible on this fretboard. And again, I am going to remove the template gently. It's only 2 pieces of tape, so not very stressful. I could have left the template in place because the next step is just to trace out the template and take it to the bandsaw and cut out the rough shape. But I wanted to show you about the alignment pins. Now, they're 1/8 inch, so there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. I just use a wooden dowel that is 1/8 of an inch. Now, I'm about to transfer over and get these 1/4 inch tall brass pins that are 1/8 inch. And I've ordered about 1,000 of them. And that's going to last me a long, long time. But the reason is because of the climate that I live in, the humidity today is at 21%. And typically it's somewhere between 16, maybe during certain times of the year in the summertime, it'll go up to 30, 35%. But it's really pretty low all the time. So a lot of times is my wooden dowels are undersized by nature, not by manufacturing, but by Denver. Okay, so I will place these in there to line up, and if there's any slop whatsoever, that could cause potential error. So all I do is I take and I wet the dowel, and you could soak it in water or whatever, and let it swell just a little tiny bit. It's only a temporary advantage, but that temporary advantage will give us enough time to get it lined up and get it traced. All right, that's a lot tighter. You don't even really need 4 alignment pins. You could get away with 2. 1, and I would offset them on different sides, but I think 4 is just a lot more rigid, and I like that. And these are fitting in nice since I wet the pins. Really snug fit, which is what I want, and that's accurate. It's not shifting, it's not sliding, it's right where it needs to be. At this point, I'm going to draw my boundary all the way around. Another tip for you. We've got to take this to the bandsaw, and we want to cut it just outside the line. We want it to be as close as we can, as close as we feel comfortable to cutting towards a line, but we don't want to cross the line because that will go into our fretboard. So you need to really see your line well. So if a normal pencil in a darker wood like ebony or something really dark doesn't work for you, you can get one of these welder's pencils, which are silver, and draw that. And even on this color fretboard, I think the silver might be easier for me to see at the bandsaw, so I definitely don't cross the line. And this water really worked because there's no tape in there, and I can't just lift it off. I have to pry it again. Oh yeah. These things will just dry and drop right out, but I'll pull them out. So the other tip is when you go to the bandsaw to cut this, take the template off. If you mess up and you cross that line and you cut into the wood, there's a chance that you could fill your alignment pin holes, shift the template over that extra couple millimeters that you had to spare, and you could make it work. But if you nick your template, then you have to go and repair your template, which I'll get into in a future video. I'll get into how you can repair those, but you don't want to have to do that, trust me. All right, I'm going to go cut this off in the bandsaw. I'll be right back, and then we're going to put that template back on and get ready for the router table. All right, now that I'm ready to affix the template and take it to the router, we need to stick this back on. Now, I'm using 4 pieces of double stick tape, you know, modest sizes, not that much. But what I found to be helpful is just to use a longer 1/8" rod, dowel rod there, and poke that through a little bit to get it lined up. In fact, now I can chop this off. And I still have it elevated. I'm not in contact with the tape. And I come over to this other corner and I get that rod affixed into there. Now that gives me alignment points to come straight down and stick to the double stick tape with the exact same alignment that I originally set up. And once that's set, I can flush cut it and flush cut it. And now it's ready to go to the router table. All right, at the router table, we've got a bit on here. This is one of these infinity bits. Actually, one of the commenters suggested this for my new body template because it's a full 2 inches high. It's got bearing on the top and the bottom, and it actually works tremendously well for that. In fact, I started using it on fretboards too. I don't need 2 inches of capacity, but it just cuts so well that I've been happy with it. So we'll go ahead and cut this out. Now, let's just talk real quick for template routing's sake, the difference between conventional cut and climb cut. This bit is going to be rotating this way. Okay, so as it's rotating, I want to push the wood opposite that direction. So I'm pushing against the forces of the blade coming out and taking that bite. The other style is called a climb cut, and a climb cut is going with. Now, going with the direction can prevent chip out and be a lot smoother of a cut. The problem is it can allow the bit to grab the wood and actually pull it out of your hands. It's not really a safe procedure to do with table routing. You can do it in very small targeted increments, or you can do it when just taking a shaving off of the wood. But if you've got a decent bite, I would not recommend climb cutting. I'd recommend conventional cut and leave the climb cutting to the CNC world. The other thing is the entire bearing of your pattern bit does not have to be on the template. If you've got half the bearing on the template, you're good. You just need to make sure the top cutting edge of that bit is at least a fraction higher than the wood itself, or you'll be left with like a paper film at the top. So you want to make sure you get all of that clean. And what we're going to do is we are going to cut and we're going to take it slow and easy, and we're going to do whatever the bit feels like it wants to do, and we'll let it cut at the pace that it wants to, and that's the safest bet, to always do it that way. All right, this is what you're looking for out of your router table. Look at all the shavings that we're getting out of this bit. This is a nice bit and it's a sharp bit. If your router bit is producing sawdust, get a new bit, okay? An old, worn out bit is actually dangerous to use. Use a nice, fresh, sharp, high quality router bit and it'll make your life a whole lot easier and a whole lot safer. Okay, there's our slotted fretboard right there. Now, you're going to want to do whatever you're doing for fret markers. You're going to want to do that before your radius. So it may be a good time to do that. Visit one of my past videos and it'll show you the techniques for doing that. So I won't cover that here today. But that's really the fret markers and the radiusing, and then the fretboard is up to that point. Now, you can radius either when it's by itself or you can radius after it's on the neck. Either one is fine. In most cases, I do it after it's on the neck. I kind of bounce back and forth a little bit depending upon the situation. I am going to go one step further before we close out this part one of our template-based guitar building series. And I am going to show the answer to the question that I get once in a while, and that is binding. What if I wanted to put binding on this fretboard? Well, you very well may. After I built this Paduke and Murado fretboard, I started thinking, man, this would really look good with some vintage cream binding on it, and then whatever the body of the guitar that this will go to has maybe the same vintage cream binding on that. Might look pretty sharp. So as a bonus coverage, let me show you that, because here's the beautiful thing about the alignment pins that we have in here. If you are going to bind the fretboard, you need to make the fretboard smaller. Okay, it's just not going to work being the same width. It'll make the whole guitar neck that much wider. So it just so happens that I have an identical, nearly identical fretboard here as the one I just used, with the exception that this one is 1/16 narrower all the way around the three sides, not the end. That one doesn't matter. So what we are going to do is put this smaller fretboard in place. And I'll just try to drop that right in, using the same pins for conservation purposes. So the beauty of the alignment pins is I can take now this next template and I can plop it right down in place, and I've got all my same reference. And now I'm going to route this the extra 16th. I could have gone right to this template, but I wanted to show you working with a normal template. But if you're going to work with binding, you may want a separate template for binding that is 1/16 inch offset all the way around these three sides. And of course, if you're going to set it off by 1/16, you need binding that's approximately 1/16. All right, so that's what we're shooting for. It makes the process a little quicker, a little easier once we get rolling here. You can use something like this from Stu Mack as bind all, and you basically put it on the edge and then you put the binding on and then you close up the tape and tighten it down. Or you can get everything in place first and just then wick acetone into that seam, and the acetone will basically melt the plastic and bring it together. So basically I will start at one side and I will pull this tight while keeping it flat on the surface. And I try to put as much leverage as I can. This orange tape is really good for this purpose because it kind of stretches a little bit, and then when it bounces back, it gives you just a little bit of a mechanical advantage. Now once you get to the ends, you're really going to have to pull that tight around there. But if there's any chance that you're going to crease the plastic, it's better off that you heat that up first to prevent it from creasing, and that way it'll get more pliable. Okay, when you get into really tricky areas like the corners and really tight radius like that, I prefer to switch to the brown tape, because the brown paper-based tape has less give in it, and therefore it's a little bit more rigid. So I use both. All right, now that we got all the tape in place, we'll just take some of the acetone and wick it in there. This is a nice little bottle I got from my local plastic supply. It's where I buy my acrylic, a place called Plastic Hair. And this is used basically for an acetone type solvent to weld acrylic together. And it works really good for dispersing into these joints. Now, the only problem area you're probably going to have is right at that corner. So after you soak that and wick that in pretty good, it's actually going all the way through, I'll take that and just a little extra pressure right at that one spot. I saw a little bit of squeeze out, which is a good sign. The rest of it should be really tight, so it shouldn't be an issue. And I'll go and I'll fill in all the gaps that I have in between the tape lines. And then I'll come back after that all cures, evaporates basically. I'll come back and do the sections under the tape. Might as well wick a little bit in from the back side too, just to make sure it all got through. All right, there is your bonus coverage for this first part of the template guitar building series. So again, if you're interested in some of my Tele templates, just shoot me an email, let me know. They're built to order now, and I'll try to get these Strats available within the next few weeks, month or so. Next episode, we're going to work on the neck itself and the neck template, and we'll use that and show you all the ins and outs of making sure that turns out great, and then we'll have the fretboard to go right onto that neck by the end of the next episode. Make sure if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell icon to make sure that you get notified. Until next time, remember, no matter what you do, start with excellence.